Hi, this is Christina Chapman and Sineva Hosea. Our book of choice was The Heart of Redness by Sineva. Sineva was born in 1948 in Herschel, South Africa. He grew up in Lesotho but was exiled because his father participated in the fight against apartheid. This influenced Zakes to join the Pan-Africanist Congress. He later decided that he disagreed with the Congress's practices and went on his own path. First, he was a high school teacher, then became a bank clerk. Following that, he decided to start his own sales promotions and marketing agency. While running this business, he studied law. After working at a law firm, he realized that he was dissatisfied with his career, so he decided to become a writer. Zakes has written 29 books and received 5 awards, one of which was for The Heart of Redness. Now he is an English professor in Athens, Ohio, at Ohio State University. The Heart of Redness is a fictional novel that intertwines 2 stories. One is within the time of Nkwasi, and the other sets in the 19th century South Africa in the Kalorha village. During the time of Nkwasi, the Xhosa people were separated due to a disagreement of Nkwasi's prophecies. She preached that if the village destroy all of their cattle and crops, their ancestors would arise and cast the English settlers into the sea. This separated the Xhosa people into believers and non-believers. In Kalorha, Bonko and No Petticoat are unbelievers that are seen as an untraditional couple. They have one daughter named Zimosa Zemea, who dislikes her traditions, dreams of living in Pretoria, and is fascinated with America. Bonko is an emotional man who bears the scars of his great-grandfather, Twin Twin. His lineage connects to the descendants of the headless ancestor. Zikzikza, the first member of the lineage, had twin sons named Twin and Twin Twin. The 2 sons were very close until their first disagreement over whether Malonhe, the man of the river, was a reincarnation of Nixel, a prophet of the past. Generations later, Zim, Twin's great-grandson, and Bonko, Twin Twin's great-grandson, bump heads constantly. This is because Zim is the chief of believers and Bonko is the chief of non-believers. Their ancestors are closely related, but their family feud is what pulls them apart. Tracing back to their roots, their forefather Zikzikza was killed by the ancestors of John Dalton. Dalton is a white male that owns a store in the village selling mussels and oysters. During this time, there was a major controversy over building a casino resort near the village. Non-believers felt as if the casino would be beneficial towards the village. The casino would bring in employment and more money to the region. The believers are against the idea because it would negatively affect their traditions. Meanwhile, Kamagu, a middle-aged man from the United States, goes to the Kalorha by Sea village seeking a woman he met in Johannesburg. She tells him that her name is Noma Rusas and that she is from Kalorha. He became infatuated with her, so instead of flying back to America, he goes to find this woman. While looking for her, he meets 2 other women and falls in love with them both. These 2 women were named Zimosa Zemea and Quikswa, the daughters of Zim and Bonko, one from each side. Kamago does not know whose side to stand by, which leads to conflicts between the 2 groups. The book ends with Quikswa moving into Kamago's cottage. Bonko thinks that the believers won the feud between believers and non-believers, all because he lost his wife to the believers and from the death of Zim. Now that Zim is gone, Bonko thinks that Zim is closer to their ancestors than he is, which is why he tries to get the head of the forefather from Dalton and his ancestors. Bonko's daughter moves to Pretoria and lost her love for Kamago and for the village. The feud has lasted for years, and nothing has been resolved. Overall, The Heart of Redness is a fascinating novel that sums up the history of wars and controversy in South Africa, describing the main events of conflicts, which including interesting romance, drama, myth, all in one narrative.
The main themes in The Heart of Redness were based on the conflict that took place. The conflict of the non-believers and the believers is described through 2 separate groups that share the same ancestors. The descendants of the headless ancestors started with Ngzisa, who had Twin and Twin Twin as sons. Zim, son of Twin, had a daughter named Quikswa, also known as the believers. Bonko, the son of Twin Twin, had a daughter named Zimosa Zemaya. They were known as the non-believers. Zim and Banco had strong disagreements on beliefs that were brought up from the prophet Nankwisi. Believers think that their people died because the non-believers did not fulfill the prophecy and therefore were punished. The non-believers think that the believers were foolish in destroying their cattle and crops and that they caused their own to perish. This conflict is what led their family to carry such hatreds towards each other. Another main theme was the fight between conservative traditions and modern changes in the 19th century. This theme was best illustrated through Zemosa Zemaya, Banco's daughter. She did not want to follow traditional ways, so she wore modern clothing. She felt trapped in her village and wanted to move away to America. She was not married and was a principal at a high school. Her parents and community were very conservative and thought she was strange for not wanting to follow her own cultural norms. She was a main advocate for the infliction of the casino. She wanted more celebrities and tourists to come to Colora, also because the casino would bring in more economic gains. These main themes were the core of the story. Each of them relates to each other and played a huge role within this book. While reading The Heart of Redness, we noticed the many things that relates to the class. For instance, we learned about the movement of Ngosa from the timeline assignment. We learned that the Ngosa were forced to move to the Ngarsa River by the British. This fact is illustrated in The Heart of Redness. In class, we also discussed the prophecy of Nankwisi involving the cattle killing. We discussed how Nankwisi led her followers to believe that killing their cattle and crops would arise their ancestors. Also, that she was a prophet that influenced many at a young age. Her prophecy is what led to the conflict of two separate groups. This was a core concept in the book. In the Ngosa timeline assignment, we learned that Ngosa people who followed the cattle-killing movement during 1856 to 1857 suffered from starvation. The book described, to ease the pain of hunger, they tightened leather belts around their stomachs on days when they could not find any roots. They survived on the bark of mimosa trees. Also in class, we touched upon the ongoing conflict and oppression of non-believers versus believers. The conflict between the two groups were violent and started from the prophecies of cattle-killing movement. The book illustrates the constant disagreements that go on between the non-believers versus believers. At last, the traditional wear was described in the book as well in the class. It described how the Ngosa women would dress in the village. Married women would dress differently from single women, and non-believers generally dress different from believers. In The Heart of Redness, it described the many cultural norms of Ngosa, which was interesting because it was also taught in class.
We found the prophecy of Nankwasi and its effects on the Osa community to be very interesting. The fact that it drove a lineage of ancestors apart for generations, separating them into believers and non-believers, is puzzling. Also, we thought it was interesting how the author, Zakes Mida, organized the plot of the book to go back and forth between the 19th century and the time of the Nankwasi prophecy. It helped connect the descendants of the headless ancestor and the connections between modern Osa culture and conservative Osa culture. Kamagu's character was interesting because it seemed to be placed in the story purposely as an outsider. He gets brought into the differing views and conflicts of Osa believers versus non-believers by his love for women on both sides of the conflict.